Thank you very much, members of the press, for coming to this press conference this afternoon. I requested the Prime Minister to call the press conference to allow the Minister of Finance and Treasury to clarify a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation pertaining to the issue of tax exemption to a particular company that is circulated widely by the leader of the opposition in all the media outlets and in the country, including two ministers of the Crown. The name of the company is also circulated, which is very careless on the part of the media and the leader of the opposition, especially when the information relating to this issue is half-baked, misleading, and distorted to achieve political agendas, rather than the desire to properly inform the nation about national issues and the exercise of statutory powers by ministers of the Crown. What will investors think of us when we are careless about the way we disseminate privileged information about the conduct of investors? This country needs investors if we are to progress. Let's not kid ourselves with the rhetoric that we can do it ourselves. We need every player, especially investors who are willing to invest in our country. I must make it very clear that the duty to be accountable to the people of this country, by people who are entrusted with statutory powers under our parliamentary democracy, is mandatory, because such powers are exercised on behalf of the people. The government am not shy away from that. The government, in fact, has no problem whatsoever with that. And we are encouraging the media to actually do that. But we must do it responsibly. The unwritten rule in all issues that comes to the attention of anyone is there is more sides to the story than what is reported. And I don't know whether that ever come across the minds of the media. And this is exactly what happened here. The media missed nearly 90% of the story and decided only to disseminate a fraction of the story, and in the process become a party to the agenda of anyone who wants to take advantage of issues to achieve ulterior agendas. This is reckless reporting and does very little to properly inform the public on issues of national interests. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to address the media report on the exemption issued to the particular company. The leader of the opposition, together with the media, made the following allegations against the government on this matter: that the Minister of Finance granted nearly $30 million worth of exemption to the company in question in respect of building materials for wharf and warehouse upgrade project and apartment resort project. According to the report, this is irresponsible and a slap on every hard-working Solomon Islander who watched helplessly their government's revenue is being used to subsidize foreign interests. Especially so when the hospital is running out of medicine. Very powerful argument. The revenue could be used to fund government services. In fact, the report went on to attack foreign investors and then allegedly accused the government for prioritizing foreigners over Solomon Islanders, accusing them of feasting on government revenue while Solomon Islanders are struggling. And as expected, the report ends with a highly political overtone, which is clearly the motive of the report, as follows. The leader of the opposition, together with the media, then accused the Minister of Finance as being out of control and called on the Prime Minister to take control and deal with ministers who are acting against national interest to the extent of sacking them. Leader of the opposition and the media also appealed to other GNAD members of Parliament not to be silent, because in doing so, they would be equally blamed. Leader of the opposition and the media also called on the public to demand accountability from the Prime Minister. Like I said, the report is tainted by half-truths, misinformation, and a desire to create hatred of the government and disharmony within the government with accusations of negligence of duty by people with ulterior motives. All ministers in the government, as I said, received e-copies of the order in their mobiles. I'm not surprised. We've seen that attitude before, and we see it continuing. Well, the truth about the exemption in question is as follows, ladies and gentlemen. The company in question is proposing an investment in wharf and warehousing upgrade of $40.9 million and $52.2 million in apartment and resort project. A total of nearly $94 million of investment. On the 26th of February, 2024, the former Minister of Finance granted the company in question on the recommendations of the Exemption Committee. The Minister does not work alone. The Exemption Committee, after they are satisfied that the investment will contribute immensely to the development of the country. Tax and duty exemptions order numbers 0122/24 and 0125/24 were issued before the national general elections. After the formation of the government, in early May 2024, I was appointed as Minister of Finance. On taking up the post, the Exemption Committee recommended that the Minister issue new orders on the same exemption, replacing the orders mentioned above, which is reviewable every 6 months. These orders are circulated in the media by some people who are working with the opposition and the media, so it is common knowledge. These orders will expire in a couple of weeks' time, in mid-November. And that is to allow the government to review the implementation of the exemption, and that's how it works. The exemptions were hardly utilized, ladies and gentlemen. So there is very minimal loss of revenue. Very minimal. On the proposed tourist resort, the company only did backfilling on the project site and have yet to import the materials required for the resort. Some works are going on the construction of the wharf and warehouse at the Renati compound. And as noted earlier, ladies and gentlemen, the exemption was recommended by the Exemption Committee because of its strong connection to the sector highly prioritized by the government, and that is tourism. If we are to attract more tourists into the country, ladies and gentlemen, one of the critical issues we need to address is the problem of inadequate numbers of beds. We hear this from the Ministry of Tourism. The government needs investors to invest in these critical infrastructures. And as Minister of Finance, my duty is to ensure that government achieves its objective. This investment, ladies and gentlemen, is right within the strategy to achieve this objective. To demonstrate government seriousness, we will, for the first time in years, increase the Ministry of Culture and Tourism budget in 2025 to properly coordinate the development of this sector. This is how serious the government is. Now, going forward, of course, as Minister of Finance, I also have the duty to protect government revenue. Under the review that I am conducting of all the big exemptions that were granted, this particular exemption is among the exemptions that will be reviewed, as I will touch on a little later. The company will be submitting a full report on the utilization of the exemptions to justify any extensions. And I made it very clear to them over the weekend. What I also find very disturbing, ladies and gentlemen, is the allegation that I am out of control and pursuing my own interest in the Ministry of Finance. And after making very bold statements about exemptions on the floor of Parliament, I failed to live up to the commitment. I find that allegation very, very disturbing and insulting, and only goes to prove that people just do not care about what they are reporting, even if they are untrue and misleading, and at worst, having political overtone. Just like any leaders, ladies and gentlemen, I find careless attack on my character and integrity very, very insulting. And I have a duty to protect it. I want to make it very clear, ladies and gentlemen, that I have not erred one bit from my commitment to implement the actions I announced on the floor of Parliament. The reforms that I want to pursue in the ministry are progressing very well. On exemptions in particular, my directive to review the tax-related issues on mining companies have been completed. And together with the Attorney General's office, we are working on the new draft clauses, which will be renegotiated with the mining companies. Most mining companies that I've spoken to have no problems with the proposed amendments to the agreement. Until these agreements are renegotiated, ladies and gentlemen, and adopted, my hands are tied when it comes to applications for exemptions that are done under the existing agreements. I'm also in the process of issuing instructions to the Exemptions Committee on my intentions to review recipients of big exemptions like the case under consideration, that are still current, with the view to establishing how the exemptions have been utilized. Any further considerations on their applications for extension of exemption will be decided on the basis of them submitting properly authenticated projected profit and loss statements to establish how any further government indirect budgetary assistance will impact their operations. I am also in the process of reviewing the non-statutory exemption application form to establish its adequacy in terms of the information that the Exemption Committee should request from any applicants for exemptions. The quantum of exemptions should be based on proper assessments of the profitability of the business, and not some random figures and percentage. I'm also in the process of reviewing the effectiveness of the Exemption Committee in terms of its analysis of the applications received. There is a need to set up a proper continuous monitoring system on the utilization of the tax exemption, which will enable me to properly brief Cabinet on the effects of government's indirect assistance to recipients of tax exemptions. And I've discussed it with the chairman of the Exemption Committee this morning. On the broader concern for improvement in government revenue, Cabinet will shortly consider a number of institutional and structural adjustments to improve collection of non-tax revenue. These will be announced as soon as the Cabinet consider my memorandum, and also will be announced on the floor power. On other allegations, ladies and gentlemen, the report carelessly alleged that the government is not concerned about the people of this country. I find that very, very disturbing. Very disturbing. It is the same kind of attack by the opposition that led to the unfortunate situation we went through in 2021. It is now, you know what, costing us millions of dollars to address those who have suffered. As far as tax exemption is concerned, ladies and gentlemen, I have yet to turn down any genuine request for exemptions by Solomon Islanders, indigenous Solomon Islanders. Let me make this clear. There is nothing stopping Solomon Islanders to invest in tourism and other sectors to benefit from tax exemptions. Nothing stopping them. As a matter of fact, our tax system has provisions that specifically address indigenous investors. That's how serious the government is. The government is ever ready to assist any Solomon Islander who is willing to take the risk to venture into these sectors. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, to allege that I neglected Solomon Islanders and prioritized foreigners is utterly false and misleading, and at worst amounts to racism by the people who continue to advance agendas of hatred in our country. And there's no room for it in this country if we want to progress. This issue will not come to this stage, ladies and gentlemen, if all of us, including the opposition, exercise due care and act professionally in the way we do our reporting. On the part of the government, and especially the Ministry of Finance, we have an obligation to do the right thing and be properly accountable for our actions under the processes allowable under our parliamentary democracy. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I am willing to take your questions on this matter.